Can I just describe Becky as the opposite of me? Tons of tenacity. When she wants something, she goes for it, which is nice, you know, to have somebody like that.
You never know what could happen. Like, you might meet somebody that's like, oh yeah, I like you guys. I'm open to it, you know?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Hi, do you happen to be single?
Yes.
Would you be interested in dating my husband? Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Wednesday, April 17th, 2024, and I am down a new rabbit hole, and I apologize. I will eventually get back to normal content, but I have been diving into the world of seeking sister wives. And in my investigations today, and I apologize, I'm not the first one to report this, but it's new to me. And if you're here for content related to sister wives, this might interest you because I thought TLC was very irresponsible when they decided to give a platform to the granddaughter of Rulon Allred. Rulon Allred, obviously of the Apostolic United Brethren, who was a convicted polygamist that spent time in prison, and he and his friends famously went through a trial where they were accused of kidnapping and trafficking young girls across state lines. And on the show, Christine had always made it seem like her grandfather was just this great benevolent guy, and they never really talked about the nefarious side of his actions. They also conveniently left out the fact that Rulon, her grandfather, was killed by Ervil LeBaron's wives in 1978 as a part of blood atonement. She never discusses his death. She never discusses circumstances surrounding the death. It's all very given around. It's all very sanitized. A lot of people had to start digging into people's backgrounds to figure out who these people were, and over time have realized, oh my gosh, this is who they put on the show. So if you live under a rock and you don't follow the show, I try not to watch the show simply because I feel like a lot of the people on Seeking Sister Wives don't have good intentions. I don't think any of these people have good intentions. I don't think the Mormon fundamentalists have good intentions, but I feel like the people on Seeking Sister Wives, it's even more nefarious in some ways. And there is a couple on the show in the season 5 that I just watched all of season 5 yesterday. And there was one couple that kind of sat in my mind as these people they make me feel very uncomfortable. And that is Becky and Justin Ryan. And that's how the names that they go by on the show. Interestingly, they're one of the only families that is not using their actual last name and are using a pseudonym or an alias. And Ryan is actually Justin's middle name. Justin and Becky are actually Justin and Becky Cunneen, and they are part of a notorious cult, or they were part of a notorious cult of the cult leader Tony Alamo. Tony Alamo was arrested in 2008 and charged with numerous federal crimes related to children and trafficking. And he was a man who ran a Christian ministry with his wife Susan. And then when his wife Susan passed away from cancer, Tony developed this idea that he wanted to become a polygamist, and he began accumulating a lot of wives, tons. So one of the first wives that he accumulated after his wife Susan died was a woman named Sharon Crop. I apologize. And Sharon, who went by eventually Sharon Alamo, was one of the defense's witnesses in Tony's case when he was on trial in 2008, 2009. Sharon was also there when he was arrested in California on federal charges. He had been on the run and they were looking for him. And he was being accused of effectively transferring and trafficking children around state lines for the purposes of illicit contact. And he was being accused of having wives as young as 8. Sharon became his head wife. She never legally married him and even testified to that at trial. She was one of his staunchest defenders, even up until his death in 2017. She passed away in 2020. And Sharon was sort of picked by Tony, and she had one daughter named Becky. And Becky happens to be the Becky of seeking sister wives, Justin and Becky. Becky Cunneen, who is from the Tony Alamo group, grew up with her stepfather, Tony. And as the first wife, her mom, she lived in the house with Tony. Her birth date is in 1981. Her parents, David and Sharon, divorced in 1988. And in 1989, when the divorce was finalized, she was only 8 years old. During the time that the divorce proceedings were going on and the custody situation was happening, her dad actually was interviewed by a local news outlet and noted that he had been concerned about his daughter, Becky, and felt that she was being held captive in a cult, that Tony had ruined his life financially and he didn't have means to fight for custody, but that she was being held in complete captivity, was not able to go to school, was not allowed to go anywhere outside of the family, was being brainwashed, and he felt like his daughter was in danger. So Becky, was never reunited with her father, David. And when Becky was 15 years old, she was effectively arranged into a marriage with Justin, and Justin was the son of a follower of Tony's. So Justin's father, Mark, was a devoted follower of Tony Alamo for more than 35 years. When Tony was actually arrested in 2008, his father, Mark, wrote a letter to the editor in a local newspaper denouncing the charges against Tony and urging people not to rush to judgment on him, claiming that he was not a member of the church, even though he was. And he was basically acting like Tony was innocent and it was this big governmental conspiracy. And what he failed to state was that he really was a member and that he had actually married his son, Justin, to Tony's stepdaughter, Becky. Becky was only 15 when she married him. And on the show, Justin alluded to the fact that Becky was the one that wanted to marry him and that she pursued him and that he reluctantly married her when she was 16 years old, which again doesn't make it any better. He's only 4 years older than her, but their dads, according to Tony Alamo News, which is a website that sort of documented all of the issues happening in that case, coming from defectors of the cult, dictated in blog posts that this marriage between Becky and Justin was arranged. So Becky on the show is very elusive and says that her dad was a pastor that believed in polygamy and it's always something that she has wanted to do, and Justin and her have been looking for a sister wife for over 20 years, and that she speaks very fondly of her dad. In fact, there's no implication or indication that her dad is a bad guy, that her dad was convicted of crimes. There's no indication of even what his church is. And trying to use a different last name to cover up who they are didn't work because Starcasm and fans about a month ago figured out that she was actually the stepdaughter of Tony Alamo. So Tony Alamo's cult was so insidious. And when the federal government raided them in 2008, a number of his followers also went down with him. And over the years, the victims of Tony have filed lawsuits against Tony and his estates and even Sharon. And Justin and his dad have been part of lawsuits and have sued others on behalf of Tony. And named in his defense witness list is his daughter, Becky, stepdaughter Becky. So obviously when he was at trial, when Tony was at trial in 2009, he was facing so many different charges, basically because he was trafficking young girls and taking young girls as young as 8. His youngest wife was 8 as brides. And he was taking them to different states to do things to these kids. And his wife, Sharon, was there with him the whole time and denied that she knew this was happening and denied that these were his wives. And it's shocking, honestly, that she was never charged. And she did not really help his case when she was called as a witness in his defense. Now, Becky was actually named as a witness for his defense, but she was never called by his defense team. And Becky never denounced her stepdad Tony's beliefs, never denounced his practice of polygamy, and never denounced the abuse of the children. In fact, in 2012, his team moved. They wanted to vacate his sentence. He was sentenced, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 175 years in prison. It's a lot of time behind bars. And Becky wrote a letter, an affidavit, a sworn affidavit in 2012 defending her stepfather, Tony, and stated that she would have testified to effectively discount and discredit the testimony of the victims of Tony Alamo. A couple of the victims in Tony's case testified that they were taken taken to Nashville. And during their trip to Nashville, they said that they were harmed by Tony and then left there by Tony and Sharon with no way to get back. And Rebecca, or Becky, said that she would have testified that they were basically lying. So a copy of the sworn affidavit I found under Pacer, and she said that she was declaring this under the penalty of perjury. I'm the daughter of Sharon Alamo and the stepdaughter of Tony, and I was a member of the church until 2005. So she was not a member of the church, even though when he was arrested, according to her. But she still was defending him. She said, I was never contacted by any attorneys or investigators prior to my stepfather's trial in July of 2009, and my stepfather's attorneys never interviewed or questioned me or asked me to testify in his defense. I was residing in Fort Smith, Arkansas at the time of trial, and Fort Smith was where his church was located. She said, at trial, I would have testified to the following matters if he would have called them. That I remember a specific incident around beginning in 1999 when I drove from Arkansas to Nashville to pick up several of the victims who were on a trip with other members of the church. My mother, Sharon, called me instructing to come to Nashville where they were staying to pick up the victims and take her back to where they were going in Arkansas because she was causing trouble on the trip and my stepfather, Tony, wanted her to go home. I drove to Nashville with Linda and Todd Williams. We met in a hotel in Nashville to pick her up and the other girls, and she was throwing a fit and refusing to leave. She was yelling, cussing, throwing her arms and screaming, stating that she did not want to go back. She was staying. She didn't want to leave. She wasn't leaving. She was screaming, you can't take me back. Don't touch me. Get your hands off me. I'm staying here. Another one of the victims was also upset about leaving and was visibly crying because he did not want to go back and was acting normal and not throwing a fit like that. We were able to get AE into the car and calmed her down in the drive back. She acted like this often. It was normal behavior for her to throw fits like this. The trip to Nashville lasted 2 weeks. We picked her up 1 week into the trip, and my stepfather and stepmother and brother stayed in Nashville for a while long. So she was attempting to discredit the testimony of the victims who stated they had been left there and that they had been abused. And instead, she was characterizing the victims as being belligerent and out of control and not wanting to leave, and that she took them back. She never testified, by the way. So she was willing to defend her stepfather, into 2012. And her mom went to her grave defending Tony Alamo. And she has, in this entire season, never denounced her stepfather and almost talks about him fondly. So she was willing to defend her stepfather and basically discredit his victims. And by the way, the victims weren't lying, and there have been over $1 billion in judgments awarded to the victims of Tony Alamo in multiple civil lawsuits across different courts across the country. So there is a lot of evidence that he did these crimes. And Tony, his defense was that he was of the belief that once a child hits puberty, they can be married. And they're an adult. So it was his belief that as soon as a girl as young as 12 hits puberty, then she's an adult. Even if a 10 or 11-year-old hits puberty, then she's an adult and he can marry them and do whatever he wants. He didn't care about the age. He was going off of biblical principle. And there's literally articles about this on his website that's still up. It's insane. So Tony's not a good guy. And Becky is seemingly still brainwashed by him because she devoutly believes in polygamy. And the tactics that Ryan and her are doing in the show are insane. For instance, they have this lady named Stephanie who they were courting that broke up with them multiple times. And they were invited by Stephanie to go visit her. And then a day before, she asked them not to come by. Instead of respecting her boundary, they drove 12 hours and showed up at Stephanie's door, knocking on her door and demanding answers for what was going on and why weren't they breaking up. And she was hidden by the cameras. They even disguised her voice and gave her a different name to protect her. And which I thought was, wow, this is wild. Like, I've never seen TLC do something like this. And in the episode, they made clear that Stephanie was not wanting to get involved with them because of the implication of who they were and what they were involved in. And it's very strange because another woman that they approached at the bar that I showed you in the very beginning of this was also agreed to go on a date with them, and the next day was like, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to put my family through that, under the, again, implication that they were tied to something. And they were like, yeah, we're used to this because it's a controversial lifestyle. Not really disclosing the fact that it's not just that it's a controversial lifestyle, it's that the two of them have been brainwashed by Tony Alamo and still believe in his teachings. and that anyone that were to get involved with him could potentially be joining some kind of cult. Now, they are not part of Tony's church anymore because Tony's church does not exist, and it basically dissolved because they lost all of their money through these lawsuits. Tony is now dead. Sharon is now dead, but a lot of his members are still loyal to him, even though his ministry does not live on. And it's disturbing because now TLC is effectively giving a platform to two people that are from this cult that were embedded in his criminal trial, Becky, and embedded in numerous lawsuits, Becky and Justin, related to the defense of Tony, with neither one of them publicly coming out to denounce them and both of them attempting to conceal who they are. And because TLC has not told anyone who they are, fans were kind of outraged when they found out that, oh my God, TLC has now platformed children of a cult leader who basically thinks her dad is like walks on water. It astounds me that this kind of stuff happens, and it astounds me that TLC thinks they're going to be able to pull the wool over viewers' eyes. And it even more astounds me that this couple was so arrogant to assume that they would actually not get caught. They would just change their last name and no one would be the wiser. Becky has an active social media and so does Justin, and they do not hide who they are. So I'm actually pretty disgusted, and Cody and the wives helped normalize polygamy and made shows like this popular. But it's just another byproduct of the fact that, one, if we continue to desensitize society on these topics, allowing people from these cults to be given fame, power, and money and normalizing their behaviors, it literally gives and lends credibility to this lifestyle that deserves no credibility, especially the cult that these two come from. Like, no one should be from Tony Alamo's group be given any platform other than the victims who have been awarded monetary judgments or the victims that have left and have been speaking out against them. But those that are still involved and have never denounced him don't deserve platforms, and it's a slap in the face to the victims of Tony Alamo. And there are a lot of them. And those victims faced a lot of shame and a lot of grief from their friends and family that remained inside. One of the victims' moms I was looking through emails and documents on Tony's website and letters from the victim's mom telling congregants that her daughter lied and deceived people. And yet in articles, the same girl is being interviewed as recently as a few years ago, talking about how the judgments and the awards, the monetary judgments, have helped change her life for the better. This is what TLC is doing. Just another day in the world of polygamy. And it's disgusting. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this topic. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click on the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.